So yeah, I'm now terrified for everybody that our fledgling totalitarian government is suddenly just one small step away from interpreting their incitement law as retrospectively applying to anyone who ever expressed any opinion they didn't like, because that may have influenced others to think some dangerous thoughts not in exact alignment with state policy. I mean, who ever heard of freedom? Of course, they could just write some new laws. That's what's become of our democracy. They hold all the cards. You know, of all my friends around the world, those in Australia are the least engaged. I learnt that from Facebook. And sadly, that's exactly why this is happening to us. Because that kind of repressed silence is ripe ground for abuse. It's been going on for years, but now it's reaching its crescendo. So I figure if I just get down on my knees as well and make my written apology, maybe they will show mercy. They're not known of late for their humaneness, having been constantly sanctioned for abuse of human rights by international bodies against asylum seekers, for instance. They're basically imprisoned indefinitely in the interest there also of being tough on borders and keeping us safe. But I figure now that they're so incredibly concerned suddenly about the old folks dying, despite having defunded their care, that they must have found their hearts in that dusty old room, and they're not quite as dark and shriveled as you might think. Okay, so here goes. I hereby take back everything I've ever said online that does not conform perfectly to state policy. I'm happy to be locked away without human contact, kept apart from my friends, family, relationships. If it's really important that people don't ever even leave their countries anymore, apart from essential people like businessmen, politicians and sportsmen, of course, for as long as our benevolent leaders want. My only concern is that no more old people die. I mean, that's unthinkable, unprecedented. I don't care about myself at all, because clearly we, the formerly working and soon-to-be expendable masses, are not so important by comparison. That previously this number of deaths from the flu didn't even make the paper is no issue. I mean, maybe if we reversed defunding the old age homes and let the families visit them at all, life would be at least livable for them. I don't know, but I suppose it's better to keep them alive that way for longer. Even if they're completely alone, unloved, betrayed, unfed, and sitting in their own excrement, we can at least start the world again with a clear conscience. Now, I don't know how some of these crazy ideas came into my mind. Maybe it had something to do with going more than a bit bananas with our whole lives shut down in the midst of a surreal dystopian nightmare. Feeling like I was in prison or something when everyone I knew didn't seem to believe that there was a good reason why. I mean, we flattened the curve as asked, but then it seems we had to eliminate it completely. I mean, we've always had such success in gaining absolute control over nature and have such a mature understanding of the reality of death. Nothing more certain, they say, but still unthinkable. You know, all that stuff about other places like the Indian slums reaching herd immunity by doing pretty much nothing except giving out a few meds that cost a few dollars. Or Sweden and Japan actually respecting their people to do the right thing without forcing them was just going to confuse the issue. Much better to just spin that they were total failures when in fact their death rates were a little bit higher and they maintained a life and an economy to boot. You know, I read an article the other day saying those serological antibody tests might be a bit unreliable. Not like the PCR tests that are so precise. No issues at all. All depends on how many cycles you run, because you're not even testing for the virus at all, but just byproducts of all sorts of possible stuff. Maybe even a chromosome? Actually, I wonder how that papaya that tested positive is doing. I should send flowers.